Hi, everybody. Today's talk is called Do We Really Need the Dharma? It may surprise some newcomers to Buddhism to hear that it says that they don't have an ego self. However, through practicing, we can come to recognize that such a self exists only in thinking, as there isn't a self, an ego self, apart from our thoughts. Saying this doesn't really help, though, for we will end up thinking about this self and trying not to think about it. Indeed, thoughts and enlightenment cannot exist at the same time. When one is here, the other cannot be. So the Dharma, which is composed of thoughts, is not in itself enlightened. For instance, our thinking about having been enlightened is proof that we are not that now. This lack of an ego self is one of the main teachings of the Dharma. However, what I will be talking about here might seem obvious or be construed to be discouraging because the essence of the Dharma itself, being dependent on thought, only appears in samsara, our ordinary world. As such, the Dharma cannot be the absolute. Thus, we cannot be enlightened directly by the Dharma itself. What it does let us know is about what we are missing in being isolated in our thought-filled ordinary world. This also explains why those whose practice is working on koans seem to recognize that their teacher is unlikely to accept any answer that uses thought, i.e. words. Suzuki Roshi himself also recommended that we immediately forget everything heard in his Dharma talks right afterwards. The Dharma does function as a blueprint for our practice, but like a blueprint, it doesn't get referred to once it has served its purpose. The Dharma is likewise like scaffolding on a building. We certainly wouldn't think of wanting to have it not taken down so that we could live in it. The Heart Sutra goes so far as to inform us that the Dharma left to us by Sakyamuni Buddha does not exist in fact. Of course, none of the above should be taken to imply that the Dharma is of no use to us. Without the support that the Dharma provides, we might not keep on sitting, it being our way of knowing where we are and where practice is taking us. Meditation by itself is not enough. While it does show us that our minds have a calmer and deeper life side, not life side, we won't be changed by our practice unless Dharma is leading us as well. If it isn't, we would be like those in a forest who don't realize how lost they are until finding that they have circled back to where they started from. Besides needing the Dharma to inform us about what is happening in practice, we also have to have teachers who themselves have practiced at least a good while and can supply us with directions for being on the way, the Buddha's way, as well as let us know if we are straying off it. Even more senior practitioners, ones no longer depending on the Dharma, study it themselves to teach it to us. The Heart Sutra is describing such persons when it proclaims, with nothing to attain, the bodhisattva depends on prajna paramita, and the mind has no hindrances. The bodhisattva who relies on prajna, often translated as wisdom beyond wisdom, as in the Prajna Paramita Sutra is the wisdom beyond wisdom, Heart Sutra, Mind Sutra. This prajna, often translated, as I said, as wisdom beyond wisdom, is not a psychic power. It simply states that in not being blocked by personal feelings or usual knowledge, bodhisattvas don't refer to the Dharma, being able instead to see clearly what is before them. With prajna alone, we can observe what is going on with us. You will also be able to do this yourself for others someday. Thank you. Swivel to Jane here. Here we go. Put it over here. And Beth is down there, and Mark's across the room. Yeah. But
where are you? Oh, I see. Okay.
it's two of us here.
Okay.
Okay. So, anybody have any comments or questions? Brother Mark is set back down. Any comments or questions? I should write a list of questions for myself to ask for you. That would work.
Okay.
Yes, Mark.
How did you come to this? Is this something that you've learned over the years, or is this something that you have picked up from the text and your readings?
Oh, it's a combination of both. Although I must say I wouldn't say that I am free from the Dharma. I don't want to be free from the Dharma, but it suddenly, but to a certain extent, it's ordinary life takes on more meaning than the Dharma itself in your training or in a person's practice. And so it's sort of like all of a sudden, you're not, in my case, not quite as, I'm still as interested in, but in this, the same time, I don't feel that the Dharma is reality either. It describes reality, but it's not reality. And that's the difference. Yes, Beth?
Doesn't what you just called reality?
Hold it, Beth, hold it. Yeah, get you on the screen.
My doubter's mind is coming in about the way you said we need the Dharma. Doesn't the thing that the Dharma is an expression of want to find us?
I'm sorry, it's the exception of what?
Doesn't the thing that the Dharma is an expression of or a teaching of, doesn't it want to find us?
Oh, okay.
And if that's true, why do we need the Dharma?
Well,
I didn't understand the connection to the last question.
Yeah.
I understood the first question, but the connection to the second question.
About trust. If we have a very deep trust and practice and trust the thing that occasionally touches us, that the Dharma guides us to,
Mhm.
will that other thing not find us?
The other thing is not the Dharma, but what it guides us to.
Yes.
I don't know if it finds us. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that actually, if it finds us. Because I myself don't feel found by the Dharma. So I don't exactly, so I really can't answer that. But the thing that I repeated several times within the context of the talk was, don't depend on the Dharma. You know, you don't read, you don't need the Dharma to coach you anymore. Yes, Mark.
Is this something akin to like when you're traveling and you go into a rest stop and you look at the map and it has the arrow pointed to a little place and it goes, you are here? And you really don't need the map to know you are here?
That's for sure. Yes, that's a good example. Sure, why not? Why not?
Thank you.
I haven't traveled for a long time, so I haven't seen that ear sign for a while. But yeah,
But did looking at that at one time do anything for you?
It made me feel lonely once because I was driving by myself and then I was there and there was no one else there that I knew. And sometimes you do go in and there's no one there, but you're there.
But at least you know you're here.
Well,
No?
because it's a guide,
Yeah.
because the map is a guide and the you are here is a good guide, and the Dharma is a guide. But as we know, if we meet the Buddha on the road, we're supposed to kill him. So I guess if we throw away the Dharma, have we done that?
I don't know if I express it exactly that way. If you meet the Buddha on the road, you have to kill him.
I think I'd be glad to make a friend.
That's true. There's no obligation that you need to kill the Buddha. I'm sorry, I was a little more forceful in that than I meant to be. But you can kill the messenger.
That's often used in a different way, I think. But anyway, yes, kill the Buddha is another metaphor for what I'm talking about in this. Right? Not that you have to. Well, in a sense, you have to stop being. You have to stop being. You will ultimately stop being dependent.
Yes, you have to get back in your car and drive. And you have to go someplace.
Without eating?
It doesn't matter. You are wherever you are, there you are, and there the Dharma is, whether you acknowledge it or not.
If you get out and you see the sign, you are here, that maybe just confirms that your intuition was right.
That's a good example too, yeah. Yeah, so, yes, Rachel.
Continuing with Mark's visual image of you are here and the map, I'm reminded it's been a long time, but in hiking, sometimes, at least when you start out, you have that map of what the trail is supposed to be. But once you proceed ahead, at least I don't recall any interim maps saying you are here. Once you started out, you better have a compass, or have already been on the path before, so you have some experience. And I guess it's just an image I'm bringing up of how you can be absolutely lost in one section and not even realize which section of the path you're on, much less, you know what I mean? You can be so disoriented that you don't grasp of even where here is. And so I just appreciate that reminder that well, at least for me, or some people, sitting all by your lonesome on a cushion can strand you on the cushion and out of life and completely out of sight, too. It's kind of a question, Peter, but you have to find the question.
I sure do. But I don't need questions. Comments are fine. We don't have to have a question. But is there a question there?
More of your reflection on, how can I put it? Solitary journeying, wisely and then foolishly. I mean, in other words, setting out, just meandering your own way versus with a sangha or a teacher or a dharma brother or sister.
I have an image in my mind that doesn't really answer your question, but it's a personal one. When I was maybe 17, with my brother, I lived in Connecticut, and there was one mountain in New England, which is in itself rather small. But anyway, so he and I went on a road trip for a couple of days. We drove up, across the next state, Massachusetts, and into New Hampshire, which is the next state. And my brother was driving, and I was telling him what to do. And so he said, and we came to an intersection, and he said, well, and I had a map in front of me. He said, which way do you go? And I looked at it and I said, oh, straight. And then we went straight and straight and straight and straight and straight. And I was, of course, in the passenger seat. And then at one point, I looked over my shoulder out the window, and there was the White Mountains behind us. Although, yeah, they're White Mountains because they're the only mountains that you see snow, I guess. They're high enough to have snow on them sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, but so therefore, what I make from what you said, however, is that, we can give bad advice. It's possible. So we can be fooled by the map or fooled by misunderstanding the map. But I don't think that's a problem now. I don't think, because, well, then of course the teacher part comes in, and then the teacher is supposed to straighten you out. I don't think I've done that right now, but that's fine too. John?
Thank you for the talk, Peter. This is something that I often, to be honest, I struggle a lot with the Dharma. Not so much so for me, Western Zen is such an offshoot of Buddhism itself. And the Dharma is so tied to some things in Buddhism that I just find it so hard to get on board with. Like, I know Jane loves the Lotus Sutra, but I find it really hard to get on board with the Lotus Sutra. You know what I'm saying? When reading it, I mean, I just find it hard to find the root in some real teachings for me in the Lotus Sutra and similar, very esoteric things. But at the same time, I understand the underlying current of the Dharma and what those esoterics are trying to put forth. So for me, a lot of times I'm constantly battling this, and I just think to myself, more so the metaphor of like the boat trying to get across the river, to the other, I'm trying to get to the other side. And the Dharma, to some extent, is the boat itself. And the river is life trying to keep rushing. And there's a current. It keeps trying to, send me down the river and keep me from getting to the other side. But I think one thing that I constantly need to try and remember is that even though I have the Dharma and I'm in that boat, I have to work. I have to paddle. I have to use the Dharma to get me to the other side. I can't just sit in it because then the current is just going to take me down the way. So for me, sometimes I need to remind myself that the work is necessary, not just sitting in it to some degree, if that makes any sense to you. And so I try and find the things that in the Dharma that I can really root on, kind of grasp onto to help me get across. But I know that once I get across, I need to throw those things. I'm not going to need the boat anymore or any of those other things that I grasped onto to get me to the other side. But there is definitely some things I need to grasp onto within the Dharma to help me along. Does that make any sense? And am I?
Jane's got an
I
answer.
knew Jane's hand was going to come up because I mentioned the Lotus Sutra.
Not mine.
If you want to go with the Lotus Sutra some point, John, we can. That's true, I do love this sutra. There's so many things in it that are probing your mind in a different way. That's interesting. But I was gonna say, the Dharma doesn't, one of the things we struggle with is like when you climb the 100-foot pole and you leap off and all your experience after that is one of really learning in the dark where nothing is that clear. And you can get lost very easily if you haven't conquered yourself enough to really look and listen. So the language of the Dharma isn't always obvious because it's always teaching something that is beyond words. So it's like you have to learn to listen in a different way, not trying to make the senses work in the same way. For example, if you read something that is telling you or teaching you about where you are, you can't always expect it to say you are here, because that's not the language of Dharma always. And so you just have to get used to hearing and understanding your life in a completely non-verbal way. And that's what Peter was talking about, with the thinking. So you have to stop relying on thinking as your mainstay for understanding where you are, or what you're doing, or where you're going to. So that, it's just like learning a foreign language almost. Mark.
Let me answer John first. John, I commiserate with you. I also, when I first read the Lotus Sutra, which is back in Tassajara, pretty early on, and Suzuki Roshi lectured on it. And during his talks, he said, "I'm sorry I have to do this," something like, "I'm sorry I have to do this to you, but you really should know this stuff." And so, but now I find that the images come back to me.
Yeah, me too.
But at first, I got lost in the what I would call the flowerliness. I particularly at that point didn't get the Tathagata coming up and looking at and to talk, and he's surrounded by Buddhas on lotus leaves everywhere, yeah. And or not lotus pads, not leaves, but a lotus pad, lotus pad, made a leaf anyway. But now, of course, that's what's happening right here. I'm looking at a dozen or so Buddhas on lotus leaves. So that's the point, actually. See, the point of that one image in the Dhamma Sutra is that that's of us all having Buddha nature, and it's all and we are always talking. Right now, I'm talking to Buddhas. If I was talking to my baker would be a Buddha. If I was talking to Emma, who's living with us now to help us, she's a Buddha. But we can see that more clearly living with her. But anyway, so therefore, don't give up on a Lotus Sutra.
If you have any particular questions about the Lotus Sutra, I'd love to talk about it further with you, John. So,
well, I was just I scapegoat the Lotus Sutra. but I would, because it's an excellent example of what I'm talking about. But just in general, the more esoteric parts of it, of Buddhism, are the part that's a little harder for me to, like, I'm at the point in my practice where I need to break through the cognitive thinking about the practice, and to, and the more and somehow be more accepting of the teachings that are more esoteric, and learn just what you said. And so this talk is very apropos for me, because I just, it's hard for my logical mind to give way to spending time reading the Lotus Sutra or something similar. Like, I just, like, it feels so just, it's like, a waste of my time, to be honest. But I know that it's not, but I'm just trying to break through that. So I thank you for this. Thank you.
John, one thing I like that, if you think I've got to break through this, that is truly a waste of time. Because when you're working with something so enveloping and yet unintelligent to the mind, you can't force your way into it. You really wait for it to integrate itself in your life and for you to connect with it in a nonverbal way. So the thing is not to break through anything, but to just stop and drop off what you don't need.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Mark. Oh, I thought you Mark was up before. Yes, Mark.
Okay,
Okay.
no problem. If everyone will indulge me to go back to the rest stop and back to the map. As you were talking about it, Jane, it says you are here. Maybe it just needs to be here. Maybe we don't need the you, because who's there? The other thing is that I think that the talk about what John and Rachel talked about too, being out on the trail, being out and crossing the river. I don't think you're always going to find what you're after. I think it's more we're on an ocean where points are not known and there are no instructions. There is only to be there. And where we end up, whether we drowned or we hit land, it doesn't matter. It's the same.
Mark, I think you should read more. Not because of that answer, however. Not because of that. But that's what came to my mind. Is Mark, you should read more.
Yeah, what should I read?
Mountains and Waters Sutra.
We're just starting doing that. By the way.
We'll start with the Lotus, I guess,
really
and then we'll work our way
I
around.
began working after I did my Dharma talk this morning. I finished my Dharma talk. I began working on that too. We just started on it last saying. It's kind of a major challenge.
You could say there are instructions all the time. We're surrounded with them. We don't hear them because we're waiting for another kind of language.
We aren't waiting for the kind of language.
That's true.
Yeah, I would say it's the same thing.
What was that?
Oh, well, because we don't hear. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're not listening because.
We're not listening because we're expecting something different.
Yeah.
But if we actually listened without trying to think it through first, we might find more than enough instruction.
Yeah.
It's, yes, to trust our senses, to trust our being. A great example is that I read an account of people who travel with islanders with no compass, no maps on island journeys in the Polynesians.
Mhm.
And they will watch the sky, they will feel the air, taste the air, they'll actually taste the water, they'll listen, they'll lie on the bottom of the boat and listen to the water. And this guides them.
Yeah.
They're actively using their senses to find their direction. And we will rely on so much symbolic meaning, maps, instructions, GPS, That's who we are. So maybe a little less of all the expectations that we have on the journey um, are kind of the dharma that we must work through.
Yeah, so dropping off rather than taking on something new.
Yes.
Mark, I liked your image. I'll be here in a minute, Rachel. Mark, I liked your image about you are here. That's a very good one, actually.
My favorite.
Because there's two faces uh, of emptiness or of the opposite of types of ego. Today I mentioned ego self. I should have said two types of self, not I said that wrong. But there is two kinds of self, and one is ego self. That's the you. But R is and that's sometimes called the self of being. But the self of being, I'm actually now repeating someone else's words actually, but the self of being is the second R.
That's sounding like
So
what a pirate would
so
say.
one thing is static,
Being.
which is the inside.
I don't.
And
yeah.
another thing
Yeah.
is not static, it's the outside, and it's always in motion, which is our world. And so you give up the internal, the you, and you give up the external, R, which is everything is, and then you're just left with being in the present, and being in the present and being in one place, and that's the here. So your image works very well. You are here.
Oh, good. Yes.
Yeah.
I like it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've just been struggling with it, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is,
Struggle with that.
it is fun. Rachel?
Thanks, Jane, and thanks, Peter, for the talk. Well, I was going to say one thing, but that you are here a junction. It reminded me, I had a friend some time ago who had cancer, and I had cancer, but hers was somewhat before and then after. Anyway, she was disconsolate because of inactivity. Anyway, I remember I found something Maezumi Roshi had said, and I sent it to her, which she quite liked. And it was just a quote. He said, "To be is to do." And that was greatly consoling to her. But it reminded me of you are here, because when I heard that, I heard both being subjects. There wasn't an object, but here is the you. I mean, that they're one, and which required a suspension of usage, the way English language is used, and it reminded me of before, I think, when John was talking about explicit instructions or explicit rational thinking. And I think I had many years education in literature, but poetry, and I studied and I also wrote myself, and I became accustomed to the idea of there being many levels of meaning. And so when I read Zen literature, to me it was reading poetry. Do you know what I mean? I didn't expect, everything was implicit and it was not explicit, and that's what I expected. But what's really strange is the juncture in learning or sitting where thinking had to be dropped. And that's when it was a surprise to me personally to see that so much thinking and analysis had gone into what I thought was just a marvelous ability to see different meanings all at the same time, not seeing how thinking, do you know what I mean, unsupported all of it. It was just like having a vast network instead of a straight highway or a straight path. And the ability to drop comprehension or explicit instructions from the language. It was just fascinating that it opened up a completely different way of instruction. But that's just a note of appreciation, and thank you, Peter, because I feel that you pointed in that direction.
Yes, I'm actually, I, in my mind just then, I extended the metaphor because you, right, which also, by the way, is samadhi, and are, it's once again, someone else's thinking, you, or this is Tibetan thinking, and you are, which is vipassana, which is awareness of, not just of your mind and being still in zazen, but also of your world, which is movement. That's vipassana. But the here is the third step, because that it's when you are here, they say, I'm tapping on it intentionally, when you are here, that's when you can merge that with enlightenment. You have to be in the moment before it's impossible to go beyond the moment, you might say, or have the moment expand temporarily. So anyway, so that's the third section of the practice. I'm ready for Chris to say it's time, Peter, because I think it may be. So
It's time, Peter.
Thank you, Chris, for backing me up there. And so I guess we'll do our service now.